Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to our fourth session of the day, which is on HPC centers as EOSC providers. If you're in this session, you probably know that the connection between HPC centers and provision on EOSC or working with EOSC is one that is still ongoing. In this session, we're talking about the bridges that are being built between HPC centers and EOSC, zooming in specifically on topics like resource allocation and interoperability issues. We have 4 speakers in the sessions that will present different aspects of this. We have a talk on the FENIX and EOSC collaboration, then also PRACE as an EOSC service provider, on how to connect users to EuroHPC LUMI via EOSC, and then finally the C-SCALE HPC Federation for Earth observation in EOSC. So the first session that we're going, or the first talk that we're going to get started with is by Ting Long, a research engineer at the Forschungszentrum Jülich, which is part of the FENIX-E infrastructure, which unites 6 European supercomputer centers. So Ting specifically focuses on the development and deployment of the data transfer service in FENIX, and she will present the collaboration between EOSC and FENIX. So Ting, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So hello everyone, my name is Ting. I'm from Jülich Supercomputing Center, and today I'm going to introduce FENIX and its collaboration with EOSC, and to be more specifically, its collaboration with ESCAPE. So FENIX is a collaboration of HPC centers, including BSc, SEA, CHINECA, CSC, CSCS, and JSC. So FENIX is a federation of infrastructures. As you can see in the photo on the right here, FENIX infrastructures in orange. FENIX provides this federated interface for different platforms that requires HPC resources like the computing resources and the data resources, for example. This will nevertheless provide benefits for cross-site projects like, for example, eBrains, because this would remove the redundancies for users to apply for multiple accounts or resources located at different places. So FENIX is federated through a central proxy IDP, which we call the FENIX AI. So in the figure here, you can see the structure of the central proxy IDP. Namely, it is integrated with partner-side IDPs and external IDPs, such as the HPP IDP, or nowadays the ESCAPE IDP. And in this way, users from different user communities can authenticate to the central proxy IDP through their local site IDP and then access different FENIX services. Now let's take a look at the FENIX architecture. So in general, FENIX has 2 environments. One being the traditional HPC environment that provides scalable computing resources, and the newer cloud environment that provides more interactive computing resources, and it's also facing broader user communities. Today we're talking about bridging EOSC and FENIX, and this will go through the cloud environment. So to be more specific, we're thinking taking the ESCAPE data lake as the first step towards bridging EOSC and FENIX. The ESCAPE data lake provides a flexible and scalable infrastructure to store and access scientific data. What we're thinking is to include FENIX archival data repository in the ESCAPE data lake. That means we would like to provide a data transfer interoperability from ESCAPE to FENIX and vice versa. So the data transfer from ESCAPE to FENIX, or the other way around, is possible through the data transfer service in FENIX. The data transfer service in FENIX is fulfilled by adding Swift object store support to FTS3 FTS3 is the file transfer service developed by CERN. And in this figure here, this is the workflow of the data transfer from ESCAPE to FENIX. Prior to the transfer, the user should authenticate to FENIX via ESCAPE and receive an access token. And the user can submit a transfer job with this access token to FTS, and FTS will authenticate with FENIX AI. And if all of these succeed, FTS will perform the data transfer and by pooling the data from ESCAPE and then uploaded it to FENIX. In the demo we're going to see later, we're actually using two sets of credentials instead of one here. And this is because FENIX AI and ESCAPE AI are not fully integrated yet. And that's why we need two sets of credentials, one for FENIX and one for ESCAPE. And now we'll go to the demo. It's a video here. So in this, here you see the OpenStack Swift interface. It's a web interface. It's located at CSCS. And now this token is actually an ESCAPE token, and we would like to submit the transfer using the FTS command line interface. And this is what we're doing now exactly. So we're basically doing transfer from ESCAPE, this is a web dev server, to the OpenStack object store at CSCS. So this is the backend of the server, actually, because I have it running, so you can see what's underneath. Well, this services is finished. Well, we can verify that through the web interface, for example. Now we're refreshing. And okay, there it is. And you can see that I transferred it to an ESCAPE folder, and I have the text file to verify it. We can just download the original source file from ESCAPE web dev server. Well, it just says some data. Yeah, of course, you can verify it through the web interface as well. Just open it, and there you go. And now you see that the data transfer actually happened from ESCAPE to FENIX. Okay, this will be the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Xieting. I'm still struggling with your name. I'm sorry. I'm trying my best, but I'm afraid that I'm just not very good at it. I'm learning, hopefully.
No problem.
Then next up, we have Debora Testi presenting the PRACE Partnership for Advanced Computing in Europe and its role as an EOSC service provider. Debora is active in PRACE and supports the organization of the PRACE ICEI calls for resources. She also coordinates access to HPC facilities for young researchers via the HPC Europa 3 project. And Debora is also part of the EOSC Future project, where she facilitates engagements with HPC stakeholders. So Debora, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Gathering. So yeah, I will give a short presentation on the experience so far got by PRACE in being a service provider via EOSC of HPC resources. So first of all, why HPC resources are important in EOSC. Obviously, EOSC has the plan to become the main entry point for researchers in Europe who are looking for services and would like to access services to build their own data management workflow. And as in this representation of the data management workflow, HPC resources, computational resources are key, both in the first data processing and then in the post-processing of data to fulfill the overall research data lifecycle. So it is very important that EOSC is able to support a researcher in easily finding and making access, request access to this kind of resources. Just a few words on what is PRACE about, for those who might not know. The Partnership for Advanced Computing in Europe has the mission to enable high-impact scientific discovery and engineering research across all disciplines, with the main objective to enable normally large-scale research projects that goes beyond what can be provided and offered at national level. So this kind of resource provisioning is normally relying on the evaluation of the scientific and technical excellence of the project request through a peer review process. This implies that the time between the request of the user and the actual acceptance of the and granting access to the resources is normally quite long, between 3 and 6 months. And this might look as a bit not in line with what is the EOSC portal concept so far. However, we think that there are a lot of other resources that can be more of interest for EOSC, or even more of interest for EOSC. For example, benchmark and related services. HPC resources offer to make development or benchmarking and preparing for large-scale projects, as well as training and support programs. So all these services that I just mentioned have some commonalities. First of all, the access is normally provided quite in a brief time frame. Sometimes just a quick technical review is needed. They are open to everyone, both from public and private sector, and they have just the requirement that they have to comply with open access research principles. So PRACE has already worked on onboarding different kind of services and resources via the EOSC portal, in particular like the preparatory access call that is in this slide. And this has been done very much in line, as all the other services that are currently onboarded in the EOSC portal. What the current, let's say, workaround to the provisioning of resources that is very particular for HPC is that the type of access has been set to open access with a redirection to the website where actually the user will land to make the request and find all the details about the type of information that he needs to provide. These onboarding activities that have been done already by PRACE is being used in this period to prepare a set of feedbacks and recommendation for the EOSC portal and onboarding team for specific HPC related requirements. As I just mentioned, we have so far encountered no barriers to the onboarding, so this can be already achieved with some minor workaround in the current procedure. What I already mentioned is that maybe the time needed by the user to access the actual resources might not completely be in line with the current overall EOSC concept. And this time might be relevant information to be provided to user directly in the EOSC portal and make it more evident when the user gets to this kind of resources. In this period, we will start the onboarding of other type of calls, like the one organized by PRACE that is offering some of the FENIX resources that Shiting just presented, because we see a clear benefit, obviously, on the onboarding on the EOSC portal, which is obviously the increased visibility of the resources, which will lead to an increased usage, higher number of publication, and a larger scale user base for the HPC code, which is very important. And we think that the current, besides the adjustment that might be done in the next period following the recommendation that would be made, the onboarding can be already enlarged to other type of HPC access offering, like national call or other type of national resources that can be offered. That I think, yeah, that is all from my side.
Thanks a lot, Debora, for that interesting presentation. We have another presentation lined up now by Ilja Livenson. Before that, I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we've posted a link to a Slido in the chat where you can post your feedback and questions to specific speakers or more general questions. So next up, it's Ilja, who will present how users can connect to EuroHPC LUMI via EOSC. Ilja is working as a solution architect in the HPC Center at the University of Tartu and an Estonian national research infrastructure. As part of that, Ilja works on the development of the Puhuri service for HPC resource allocation used by EuroHPC LUMI. So Ilja is going to give us a tour, I think now, of connecting those users to EuroHPC LUMI via EOSC. So Ilja, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the introduction. To some extent, I'm going to repeat the introduction because not because I want to highlight where I work, but because I want to highlight some of the hats that a person working at the HPC Center tends to wear. So my first hat is being a member of the HPC department, where we are essentially serving the local users, meaning university users. On the other hand, as part of the national research infrastructure, we are essentially supporting users that are connected with Estonia in one way or another. So either from Estonia or are collaborating with Estonia. And finally, as a person working in the EOSC Nordic, where we are trying to figure out how the cross-border resource delivery looks like, we are serving service providers that are essentially not nationally bound, but instead want to go across the border. And the last point is important because when we designed the EOSC Nordic, which is the regional project for implementation of the EOSC, our hypothesis was regarding the EOSC publishing, EOSC services, is that EOSC is composed of the services that are available both locally, that can become available nationally, and then go international. So in terms of the publishing and promotion, this still holds. So our question for some time was, okay, but what does it mean in terms of the other direction? So how do we actually now start supporting users that are coming from abroad? With that in mind, in parallel, EuroHPC development have started, and roughly the same members that are part of the EOSC Nordic have become also members of the consortium of LUMI. So LUMI is one of the EuroHPC sites located in Finland and co-owned by several countries. So there is a consortium of a number of countries, also co-funded by European Union, which is important because the consortium means that the resources that have been purchased are allocated by the members of the consortium and the EU according to the policies that these specific consortiums members decide on their own. So there is no common policy for allocation. There is no common mechanism for saying who is qualified to get access or not. In order to enable that on the technical level, essentially, there was a common decision to develop a separate service called Puhuri, which is essentially dealing with that for the enablement part. Of course, one of the critical points was to make sure that the identities are unique. And early in the project, we thought that it would be nice to make sure that it's also unique with the FENIX research infrastructure. So essentially, we are converging there. But the important point is now, as an HPC member, I have an even better, even more problem, or maybe another hat. How do we treat EuroHPC resources? So we had a technical feasibility to essentially implement the resource allocation policies of LUMI in a way that a member of LUMI sees that. And Estonia is a member of LUMI. So we decided that, you know what? Let's say that whoever comes from EOSC is automatically allowed to access LUMI, as long as the identity is strong, as long as a common allocation model is followed. And of course, we don't want to give a worse service through EOSC to EOSC users than we have it locally. So it has to be completely automatic. So no tickets. And that is our experiment. And to do that, we basically relied on the new capability of the EOSC marketplace to register a custom processing method. So this is a development environment of marketplace, so it's not in production, but for various reasons it will stay in development. We have a specific provider which has a specific published resource, which essentially follows the access policy of type regular according to the EuroHPC ones. However, because it goes to Estonia, we automatically approve everything. So once you access it through the marketplace, and request the resource. I think I lost one slide, but doesn't matter. You need to provide the values of the computational storage facilities that you want to get. And once that happens, yes, so we have a separate project created for this event. And we add a new resource of ETIs there. We say how much of resources we want to have to avoid blowing up our quotas. It was a minimal amount of resources. And we say, okay, I want to get it. Now, if you check the timelines here, you can see that there is not a lot of time between a resource being created and the resource being ready to use. So on the backend, essentially, we get the event that somebody has requested stuff. We push the information through Puhuri to LUMI. LUMI is preparing things, and Puhuri is sending an invitation to my account to start actually using the service. Now, this is needed because we don't have the essential integration between the EOSC AI and the MyAccess ID AI used by LUMI. So we have to do this kind of transition from one set of identity to another. This invitation basically comes to my email. I click on this link. I choose my identity now through the MyAccess ID, where I have already configured I agree with the policies in terms of usage of the specific domain. And basically, I accept the invitation to join the newly created project. What happens next is that the request is being processed by LUMI. It takes a bit of time for technical reasons to prepare everything. But once it's done, so you can see the time slot, it's roughly around 15 minutes that these things are taking on the EuroHPC side, well, LUMI side to prepare everything. So once this is ready, I basically can check the details of the allocation that I have in LUMI. I can also check the username that was generated for me. And I can access LUMI and basically see that indeed I have access to the facilities. Now, we have been doing quite a lot of jumps here and there in terms of the assumptions, but this is like in full production mode, apart from the EOSC marketplace side. And this was done in order to get some experience as to what would be the actual thing. So based on the experience, we have some open questions regarding the integration. So having open questions means that we can start solving them. Probably one of the main questions is figuring out how the allocation of resources happens in EOSC. So we understand how it works if we offer local HPC service. We understand how it works if we offer it on the national level. But we do not understand what it means if the request is coming from EOSC. Also connected to that, it needs to be a bit more clear as to why would we tell users to go through EOSC if we can also say that, okay, just go to the national infrastructure. So this kind of added value proposition needs to be a bit more clarified. As I mentioned, we did it in testing environment. There are a number of things that we see in ecosystem which is not yet ready to do this full integration. For example, we do not have the contracts in place between the different operators that process the personal data. There is a certain mismatch between the way how the EuroHPC presents the service offering, how LUMI has decided to additionally present the service offering, and what is handled by the EOS core services. So this needs to be maybe aligned. And finally, it's a big question as to whether we can rely that in the future, the services provided by EOSC would become a certain extension of the services provided by the HPC center, either on the local level or perhaps also on the national level. So with that in mind, I'd like to stop. This is something that you didn't see, but these boxes are all the boxes where we have decision-making steps that have been automated for this event. So it's sort of just one box on the EOSC side, and then the machinery, which has a lot of different stakeholders in place, needs to be solved. So thank you very much, and let me stop here.
Thanks a lot, Ilja, for that presentation. We have one final presentation left before we move on to questions, and that is by Raymond Oonk. He will present the C-SCALE HPC Federation for Earth Observation in EOSC. Raymond is a senior advisor at SURF, where he also leads innovation for big data. On top of that, he's involved in several EU-funded projects where he leads tasks that will establish HPC and HTC Compute Federation for Copernicus data specifically. So Raymond, the floor is all yours.
Right, thank you, Katrien. I hope you can hear me all right, and you can also see my slides. So I'll be talking a little bit about the C-SCALE HPC Federation for Earth observation, specifically within the European Open Science Cloud. My name is Raymond Oonk. I'm from SURF in the Netherlands, and C-SCALE stands for Copernicus EOSC Analytic Engines, and is one of the EuroHPC 07 projects. Let's jump right into this. Why would you consider to come, why would we do a project called C-SCALE, and why would we consider the European Open Science Cloud for this? Well, we've all heard about climate change. Lots of things are happening in the world. Climate change is an important aspect of that, and we really see that society requires action on environmental topics. And you see this manifest, for example, in European policies such as the European Green Deal and many others. In order to really perform these actions on these environmental topics, we need to, these researchers need to analyze larger and larger areas. No more national areas. You're thinking about multi-country, continental or even global scale. And they need to do this in more details or more diverse data sets in less time, because something that happens on the other side of the world may, in more or less time, also affect us here. We see that researchers are very good at developing algorithms and workflows, and they kind of like make these on their single virtual machines within the cloud or on laptops. However, those workflows usually require a lot of interactions, and they do not easily scale. So if you really want to address these problems on environmental topics and include these large areas, you really need to scale up. And you need to scale out. So you need to start using scalable infrastructure such as supercomputers, high performance computing, but also lots and lots of connected computers such as high throughput processing, high throughput computers for data processing. And why would we go to European Open Science Cloud? It's because in essence, this field of Earth observation has been quite fragmented. There's lots of players in there, lots of stakeholders, and we believe that the European Open Science Cloud can offer a gateway to try to establish a federative and uniform approach to start addressing these problems. And here at the bottom of the slides, you see the different partners within the project itself. So within C-SCALE, we have a number of objectives. So first of all, we would like to define the type and level of federation for the compute part on the HPC and HT side. We would like to implement this federation leveraging the European Open Science Cloud standards. We would then integrate and manage the HPC and HT resources into the C-SCALE Federation. We would like to integrate the federation with the EOSC core services. And then finally, we consider ourselves to be an open federation. We would like to create procedures for how third parties can join the federation if they wish to do so. Our main goals are to build an access integration prototype for connecting these HPC and HT systems, and to deliver a blueprint on which the EO community, so the Earth community, can build. And then you can think forward towards large projects as a destination Earth. Partners in this particular part of the work in C-SCALE are listed at the bottom of the slide. This picture here is supposed to give you a little bit of a high-level view of the HPC and HT Federation of C-SCALE. And if you can see my cursor, it's mainly this top horizontal bar here called the C-SCALE HPC and HT Access Integration Interface that we are trying to establish. For that, we use a modern authentication and authorization infrastructure called SRAM in our case. There are multiple different systems, but we've chosen to use SRAM, which stands for the SURF Resource Access Management System. From a user perspective, what happens is that you can discover us within the European Open Science Cloud. You can find the services once we are registered. You will get redirected to the C-SCALE AI, hence SRAM, similar to what Ilja was showing before. You will get an identity from your local institute or from C-SCALE itself. You then get onto the integration interface via this AAI system, and you'll be able to access lots of different HPC centers that are part of the C-SCALE consortium in a seamless manner. So with one set of credentials, you can access all these different HPC centers. On top of establishing the Compute Federation, we also would like to make sure that you can use your software. So, kind of use the ecosystem of your applications that you're used to in order to do your work, and that we're trying to establish with the EO app catalog. In addition to that, data is very important. So we also want to connect the compute with the data federation of C-SCALE with lots of different providers, and also make that seamlessly available to the different users. We've also hit a number of challenges that we are trying to overcome and that we are dealing with. So for C-SCALE, first of all, we are establishing access integration of data centers and compute centers, which is not the same as a full compute federation. So it's not a given that a compute workflow that you run on system A will also work in exactly the same manner as system B. We're trying to address the differences, but that's not something that is a guaranteed thing. We are very much working on software and workflow optimization. HPCs are all about scalable systems and making good use of those. And by optimizing your workflows, your time to results will be lower. You will get your results faster, which should make the researcher happy. And it should also make the data provider and the compute provider happy, because you'll use less resources, which will make society happier, because you'll have less of a carbon footprint and less impact. As Ilja was saying before, the usage agreements, those are a story we're trying to tackle within EOSC. So how do we get the right policies so we can use all the different systems? And supporting services such as contract management, help desk, accounting, and monitoring are all things that we are currently now doing within C-SCALE or locally. But we really would also like to see what the European Open Science Cloud can offer there, and how the EOSC core services will connect to us in that sense. So finally, my summary and outlook. The C-SCALE project will run until at least June 2023, and we hope we'll be able to carry it on beyond that. The first access integration prototype for authorization is available, and the first use cases have been onboarded. Our integration with C-SCALE is ongoing, and right now we're working on the marketplace registration and trying to figure out accounting and monitoring. The software deployment is something that has a lot of attention from our side, and which we hope to make better. And then finally, I'd like to emphasize that C-SCALE is an open federation in and for the European Open Science Cloud. New providers and new users are always welcome. You can read more about us about the website I've listed here on the right-hand side, or contact us via info@cscale.eu. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Raymond, for that final presentation, where we have a few questions inside already. So I'd like to start going through them now. Someone mentioned, seconded Debora on saying that maybe we should elaborate on the long duration of the acceptance process. I think that's something that is being worked on, but maybe you have more information on that, Timea?
Maybe I would say Debora is in the best position to answer.
Go ahead, Debora.
Yeah. I think, if I understand correctly the question, I was referring in my presentation to long duration in acceptance, referring specifically to HPC resources, not to EOSC in general. And this is because normally, not normally, but many times, there is a review process that should take place. So when you submit your project, then it has to go through scientific review, technical review, and each of these takes weeks of time. So normally the final communication on acceptance or rejection, and sometimes takes a few months. The other important point in this, I think, is that normally calls to access HPC resources are not continuously open. So you might have to wait until the next call opens. Yeah, as Raymond is suggesting in the chat, that is obviously the time is also very much depending on the type of infrastructure and center who is providing the resources, but that I was referring specifically to the PRACE one.
Okay, thanks a lot for clarifying that, Debora. Another question that got some upvotes.
I can. Sorry, just to add a quick point on that.
Yes.
So EOSC Future is working with the science clusters, and there's been a sort of a broader discussion on the requirements and the things that would facilitate a better onboarding of the HPC resources. And this was one of the points that have been highlighted by all the science clusters, that there is a mismatch between the process of the acceptance and the actual allocation of the resources. So yeah, it's one of the things that we're quite aware of and are looking into.
Thanks a lot for that clarification, Timea. I don't know whether that makes it clearer for the person answering this question. If not, feel free to follow up in Slido. In the meantime, I want to take a second question, unless someone else in the panel wants to add something. If not, someone says that they are an HPC service provider and that they see a lot of systems and processes just to get a user to a traditional command line. And they're wondering whether software as a service approach would not be better for EOSC HPC. Don't know whether anyone has any ideas specifically for that.
I could maybe comment a little bit on that, and maybe Ilja as well, if he likes. So what I could say is, from my point of view, it really depends on your workflow and what you're trying to do. Some things are really done well on the command line and how you interface with the scheduler, and some things could be outsourced to a SaaS approach or a web portal approach. So for that, if you have a particular workflow in mind, I think it would be best if you contacted some of the HPC centers, either via EOSC or via the traditional ways. And typically they can give you a lot of advice. So almost all HPC centers have advisors that are being paid to help users find the best possible solution for their problem. And in some cases, yeah, a SaaS approach may be best, but maybe the other panel members may have some opinions on that.
If I may add to that, I mean, I very much agree with Raymond that in a generic case, when you have to essentially do something, when you have to offer a very generic interface, for also historical reasons, command line is not the worst of them all. However, when we're talking about command line, essentially we're talking then about the SSH interface to the HPC or batch processing resources, which is not the only way how the HPC resources could be accessed. So nowadays, when we're talking about HPC center, or for example, in case of Phoenix, or also in case of more or less all slightly larger centers, you tend to have data services, you tend to have container management services, you tend to have something like of a cloud. So all of these are essentially under some kind of allocation policy. And could be quantified as to what and how you can get. I think nowadays it's still typical that under the batch processing, it's roughly around 80% of the resources, whereas 20% is under the, let's say, more modern and more interactive means. So the EOSC HPC being SaaS would be quite a targeted solution for one or the other domain, which I think can be a challenge to be adopted for those who are used to already existing sort of command line interface and just want to get access to a new system of the same type.
Is there anyone else from the speakers who wants to add to that? I see that there's also quite a few things being posted in the chat. I think Raymond just posted an example of a nice modern EO workflows on HPC. And I saw someone before, because we were talking before about the acceptance process, Montserrat mentioned in that chat that it's also logical that the allocation of HPC resources for a while blocks the HPC capacity. And that is why users have to wait until next calls, which I do think makes sense. Once the time is taken, then it takes a while before more time is freed up. Then there's another question that I think is interesting for all the people in the panel to address. So maybe I first wanted to throw this one to Xie Ting, which is what, in your opinion, is the biggest challenge to onboarding HPC providers to EOSC?
Well, definitely for me, the biggest challenge would be the AIs. So as you can see, the AIs, they're not, well, at least for the Phoenix AI, it includes well, several other IDPs, including the partner side's IDP and the external ones. And so it's not that simple to configure, say, another IDP to our central IDP. And on the other hand, it's also difficult to say, on the other hand, say, for example, the Escape AI, if they would like to enable the data transfer interoperability, they also need to agree on a certain sense that, say, Escape user can access some of their services, and different attributes need to be, say, fixed in this case.
Okay, so for you, it's really AI. Is there other people that see other roadblocks or additional roadblocks, or do you agree that this is the main one?
I think, okay, I would like to add that I think, at least from our side, the main blocker, and this is now me talking as maybe EOSC Nordic representative, that one of the larger challenges we saw was the unclear motivation for the HPC providers to join EOSC, because at least in the Nordics, the large HPCs are typically part of some kind of national schema of allocations. So EOSC, joining EOSC with a potential statement that users would come from EOSC is sort of conflicting with the existing mandate of HPC providers to serve a specific group of users. So at least so far, I mean, the technical solutions, the technical issues are of course there, but they can be solved once there is a clear motivation why this can be useful for service providers.
Yeah, I could also add to Ilja's thing. I think both what Xiting are saying and Ilja are saying is quite important. I also want to put just the supporting services that I think both Ilja and myself highlighted. They still need some maturity in order to be integrated with our systems. I mean, we need to do reporting, we need to do monitoring, we need to do accounting. We already do all this, but in order to link that to another system, that requires work. And that requires things to be aligned well across different places. So that's really something which needs to be also value driven. So if there is a lot of value for our HPC centers to actually do that, I think it would be a natural thing to do. Also, once we have the right standards and maturity in place for that. So to really couple those two ecosystems that are existing.
Thanks a lot for the insight there. Then there's a final question, which is very much to do with vocabulary, I think, or with definitions. Someone is asking what we mean by an EOSC user and how we assess this. I'm wondering whether that person could unmute themselves to ask what it is specifically that you're trying to assess there. Because
Luciano speaking. This is my question to Ilja. Ilja said that they decided to give access to their HPC system to the EOSC user. So I'm wondering how they assess who is an EOSC user.
So EOSC user, in case of HPC center, is very simple. It's essentially whoever can post a request in EOSC marketplace. So in the current model, as a HPC center, the only way how we can understand who requested the service is through listening to what the marketplace is saying. And there we have information about the user who did the request. So it's, of course, as you know, in the glossary, we can have other and more wider meanings, but in pragmatic sense, because HPC centers give access to specific users, for us, it's just a digital identity.
Okay, thanks.
Then I see that there's a bit of a discussion that has been started in the chat as well, where Martin mentions that one of the biggest roadblocks is the knowledge and training needs, which is something that I will forward to the EOSC Future training work package. I'm not really sure, maybe someone in the call is in that work package, but there's people that have elaborated a roadmap for training. Not sure whether HPC centers is specifically in there, but it's definitely input I'll forward, because I see that Raymond agrees as well. Then I think we have a new question in Slido as well, which is whether you think there's also an awareness issue on the researchers' side, so that they're not aware yet. So that means that there's less demand for this sort of resources. I'm happy to take that question, but I think there's more people better placed here in the panel.
So I could briefly comment on this. So I'm an advisor within SURF, and within SURF we have several different systems. This is an HPC, an HTC, a cloud system, all kinds of data management services, etc. We typically see that the researchers, first of all, need to be informed on what local and national providers even have, even before you go to EOSC. So there are different pathways. Some people find us via EOSC, some people find us via national initiatives, some local. And you really need to tell them a lot about what the different systems do, how they can be useful, how they serve to their problem. And also often they come to you with a problem, have something in mind, but in the conversation you have with the user, you actually figure out that the problem is slightly different and it would fit a different system. So there's a lot of awareness indeed that needs to be generated. I also see the gap between the traditional researchers and the IT research becoming wider over time. And there's also a conversation that needs to happen to really understand each other's problems and how we can benefit from each other. So definitely, I think there's an awareness issue and there's a training issue on both sides of the medallion. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know whether answers the question for the person who asked this, but I would second that just because Raymond, I work on a few other Horizon 2020 projects that are all using Copernicus data and doing very big things with that. And I doubt, first of all, I was surprised to hear that none of them really knew what EOSC was. But then they've not heard of much of the work that is being done by HPC centers or what is available there, or what can be done with Copernicus data as part of EOSC. So I think, but from EOSC, not just specifically on this, but on other fronts, we do have some work that needs to be done in raising awareness with researchers. Where we've discussed this before, it's also a bit of a chicken and egg problem, specifically from the EOSC platform point of view, because we need to have enough things available for it to be really interesting for users. At the same time, if there's not that many users, it's also not interesting for providers. So from a project point of view, we're trying to work on two fronts there, which is why we have an event for providers here, but we do others where we specifically target users for these specific type of services and across disciplines and different types of needs as well. Don't think there's any new questions there, and we've run over time by a bit already. But what I wanted to mention is what Timmy has just posted to the chat as well. That is that we are running an Ask Me Anything session on HPC on the 7th of June 2022. So that's, I think, in about a month's time. And you can register for that on the EOSC Future website. And I'll just quickly try to get that link for you so that we'll have that in the chat as well. So that's eoscfuture.eu/events. You can register there. So thank you to all our speakers for the very interesting session. Then I'm hoping to see some of you again during the training session this afternoon. And hopefully as well tomorrow when we have other sessions planned for specific user groups, but that might also specific provider groups, but that might also be interesting for you. We specifically have one for science clusters and research infrastructures that I think is particularly interesting, maybe for some of the people here. Then EOSC for commercial providers, and then national infrastructures as EOSC providers as well. So I'm hoping to see you maybe at some of those sessions. So with that, I'm going to send you off to lunch and hopefully see you again in the afternoon. And thanks again, everyone, for giving nice presentations here.